Screw it up.
They said, well, we allocate more time for it. And I said,
Yeah.
why would you do that?
Yeah.
It's more likely to be wrong. That's Latin for we might make some money here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's kind of sad. Is there anything wrong with QuickBooks? Is there anything wrong with an adding machine? Is there anything even wrong with the Dome book? No, but it's the old story of garbage in and garbage out. You put 2 and 2 in, I'm sure the adding machine will say 4.
Well,
but if you should have put 3 and 3 in, it should have said 6.
Again, that's going to something that you don't want to have. You don't have to want to do something, like my mind doesn't even work like QuickBooks or Excel, Excel spreadsheets or anything like that. They're logical and they're wonderful, but to me it's like something else that I have to learn. So I would tend not to do the QuickBooks, and I think
if you could.
And you're looking to do something, unless you're an accountant, you're looking to learn to do something that it's just not going to be easy.
No, and the other problem is
does anybody find QuickBooks easy?
Well, I think QuickBooks is probably a very, very good system for what it's designed to do, but it's a double entry type system, and I've got some clients.
See, I don't even know what you mean when you say double entry.
It has to have debits and credits in it, and it's kind of like a full set of books like an accountant would have.
Yeah.
You know, and they do. They have a lot of trainings. They have.
Here's what I could do. I could call your office and say, girls, or Dave, what do I do here?
Right.
And then you will tell me what to do. And one thing I've learned over the many years that you've been my accountant is I just do it. I don't even argue with you about it.
Especially Ann.
And Ann was always right.
My office mate's always right.
Ann Morrison, we're going to have to give her a shout out because she just retired. And how long did she work for you?
32 years. Short timer. I said, Ann, what are you doing?
She was always 100% right. I'd call her up. I can remember this in the beginning. It would be pretty funny because she'd reconcile my bank statement for me. Another thing, like totally clueless.
We require that.
Totally clueless. And yeah, you kind of require that that's kind of an accounting thing.
No, we require it on our end.
Well, yeah, you'd have to. And I'd call her up and say, Ann, there's got to be some kind of mistake. I'm overdrawn like $100. She's like, well, Diane. And then she'd explain the whole thing to me. And then I'd say, okay, you're right. So, yeah, we want to give a shout out to Ann Morrison. And
you touched on an interesting subject there, though, because if I was advising someone as to what they'd be looking for, when I set up like 17 offices in California, and there was plenty of bookkeeping services out there back in the 80s.
Why? Why in California?
They just always did.
But not here?
Not at that time. I mean, now if you look in the yellow page, there are some services. And if someone's looking for a service, they want to get out of the accounting business and let somebody who knows what they're doing do it.
Yeah.
You need 2 things there. It's important that they reconcile your bank statement. I explain to clients that we don't reconcile the bank statements because you can't. We reconcile it because we want control before we go near the computers.
And you categorize everything,
right.
Yeah.
And then we'll categorize it all. But we still need to know how much is going in and how much is going out. And you get into an IRS audit, the first thing they want is the bank statements. Second thing you absolutely should have is a monthly profit and loss statement. It should show monthly and year-to-date numbers. Because we talked earlier about...
It's a good way to judge how your business is going.
Well, the problem is if you do it any other way, like say quarterly. Say it's a liquor store, and you're doing October, November, and December all as one financial statement. They'll die in October. But November, they've got Thanksgiving, and come December, they got Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah, big time of year for them.
So all together, mushed together, you don't realize that there's a cash need in October of trying to get more bottles up on the shelf. See, but the way we do it, and because we do it monthly, and because we give them that book back at the end of the year, they can see what kind of expenses they have and when they have them. That's very important because cash management is very, very important for a small business person.
It is.
And if you have fluctuations, the obvious is, well, how much is the fluctuations? And if you're talking about year-end planning, like we talked about doing something by December 31st, I have to have all my numbers up through November by mid-December.
Right.
So that I can, if I can, tweak it a little bit so as to how that tax return is going to turn out. It fascinates me that accountants don't know they just put the numbers on the returns.
Right.
I don't put the numbers on the returns. I want to make sure I know what the numbers are that are going on the returns.
Right. And
but
so
again,
then you can advise your client too, because you can say,
if you don't get this stuff, like you take the sharpest accountant in the world, and he's doing the quarterly payroll reports. So the accountant, the client brings down October, November, December, gives it to the accountant in January. What is he supposed to do for year-end planning by December 31st? It's gone. It's gone by.
Right.
Doesn't mean he's not sharp. It's just the way the whole thing's set up.
Right.
But when we do it monthly, we have those last 2 weeks before they get to the year end, whether it's a fiscal 3/31 year end or anything like that. Every single one of them, we have a list. We check them out, see what we've got to do, if anything, before we get to the end of that year. And also, we decide. I help them decide: do they need a corporation? What kind of a corporation?
Right.
What's the year end going to be? What method of accounting? All the things that enter into that. Again, listening to my client. We have a mutual friend, Debbie, without getting into last names, and when we get into planning doing her planning, one of it was about the fact she was trying to buy the business. Mm-hmm. Now that influenced how I set the whole thing up.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if she
and
wasn't,
she did very well with that.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It all worked out the way it was supposed to.
And again, that's a perfect example of that she doesn't want to do any of her accounting work or bookkeeping work. She really likes the fact that she can just give it all to you, and everything gets done.
Right.
And then she can, because it's a very successful business, and then she can just run her business.
Right.
And I think that people are also really funny about talking about money. They would rather talk about their sex life than money, I swear.
I'd rather hear about it.
You'd rather hear about
what,
their money or their sex life?
Oh, their sex life.
Oh,
but they won't tell
okay,
me.
yeah, well.
I know. You're absolutely right. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, people are very, very funny.
It's a very volatile thing.
It is.
And
it is.
Remember we were talking about how many of my practice were self-made millionaires?
Yes.
And I think I figured out over 50% of them. But I'll tell you something they all have in common. Number one, they're pretty good with numbers. And number two, they're very good at money management. People think, if I just made more, I'd be all set. No, it's not true.
Right.
It's not true at all.
Right. And they have,
once you get beyond the basics.
And you see, remember that book, I thought it was fascinating because they were talking about the Millionaire Next Door. Wasn't that the name of it?
Yeah,
and they said,
I was laughing through it.
Millionaires most of the time are married to teachers, and millionaires drive Ford F-150s more than any other kind of truck.
They would never pay more than $300 for a suit.
They would never pay more than $300, but they were worth millions.
Yeah.
Now, you and I both know people who are self-made millionaires.
Yes.
Never went to college.
No.
Own businesses.
That's right.
And small business is what drives America.
That's right.
It's so important. Because I know I run the chamber, so I'm a little, I've got a little soft spot for small businesses.
That's right.
But they really do drive the whole economy.
That's right.
And now what I'm seeing now is a little bit of a trend. I don't know if you're seeing it in your practice, but I think things are getting better.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
Yes, I do too.
Yeah, I think the economy's getting better. I think people are working more and spending more money.
I think that's true. And again, that's sometimes what we have to do for part of the tax planning. One of the things that interests me at the end of every year is how many W-2s do we crank out?
Isn't that wonderful?
Because I feel that for every one that we cranked out, like a couple thousand of them.
That was a job for somebody.
I feel that we helped those businesses, therefore their employees, therefore their families, earn a living.
Oh yeah, I love to see people get jobs and work. I mean, when I see there's a lot of construction going on around, and I could just feel it. I know in Charlestown, we're keeping an eye on a lot of development things that are going to be happening for small businesses, and but I think it's so important for people to identify and maybe come up with a business plan too. I think that's a very important part. Before they go into the business, come up with a business plan, talk to somebody like you, and then if they decide that they're going to pull the trigger, then they talk to somebody like me.
That's right. Oh, yes, absolutely.
So then we'll say, okay, let's get this thing going for your design and your website and all that stuff.
Successful people have a good team. They don't try to do everything.
Right.
Like I was saying about
Donald. They can't afford to have all that in-house anyway.
No, you can't. You absolutely
no. And you know what the mistake is too? I'm sure you'll see this. Say you're Joe Schmo, and you're going to have and you're going to, oh, I'm getting my signal that we have to. That just went by too fast.
We should have talked faster.
We should have talked faster. Yeah, well, I talk pretty fast, even with my Boston accent there. So I wanted to wrap it up for tonight and thank my sponsors again, Chad, Charlestown Against Drugs, and the Zelma Lacey House. And without their generous sponsorship, this program wouldn't happen. I think, Mr. Lynch, we're going to have you back. Maybe after tax season.
Maybe if you get some feedback as to things that people would like us to address, beyond just what their accounting needs are.
I'll put that out there and see what they do. All right, good night, and remember, Charlestown now and forever.